Hello everyone. Sorry for vanishing off the face of the earth for a couple months on here. During my time being gone, I made a Twitter account on impulse, and I'm getting counseling, so that's good. The counseling, I mean. Knock on wood, my Twitter presence won't get me cancelled. Since it's Autism Acceptance Month, I decided that I would tell the story of getting my autism diagnosis. While the story takes place when I was around 17 to 18 years old, there's some backstory necessary for the tale when I was a young child around, I think, 3 or 4 years old, but I could be mistaken because I've learned the hard way that my perception of time and when events happened is fucked. Anyway, let's begin. When I was a young child, my mom would always take me to church, in particular to this classroom separate from the main building where other young kids would be taken while the adults worship. The reason I mention this is because every time she would do this, she would end up having to go back to the classroom due to me, quote-unquote, throwing temper tantrums, to the point of me being a threat to myself and others. Also, as a young child, I had to go to 2 preschools. One was a regular normal preschool, and another because I was determined to be, quote-unquote, developmentally delayed. I really don't remember much about my time in either, except I do vaguely remember being put in timeout corners multiple times in the latter of the 2 preschools. I bring both of these up because it will come up later, so put a pin in it for now. Fast forward to me having recently turned 17. I started going to a counselor due to being extremely depressed. After going to several sessions with her, she had a meeting with my parents to talk to them about possible diagnoses that I had and also to talk about my gender dysphoria, since she found out I'm trans and I was going through a lot of stress due to my parents being unaccepting of that. Besides talking to them about that, she suspected that I might have Marfan syndrome and/or autism. If you don't know what the former condition is, I'm not surprised, since it's a rare genetic disorder where the main symptoms are tall and thin build, long arms, legs, and fingers, and flexible fingers and toes. I pretty much looked the part of someone with the disorder minus not having flat feet, so it freaked out my mom immensely. Upon knowing I might have the disorder, I was pretty much in and out of medical centers, getting tests done to see if I have it. It turned out I don't have it, but I do have a diagnosis of Marfanoid habitus, which basically means I have symptoms resembling Marfan syndrome, but don't actually have the disorder. The next step after that was to see if I was autistic. It took a while to find a place to help diagnose me, but we finally did. I had to take some tests there, and it got messy because I was not mentally well and was on the verge multiple times of ending up in a psych ward. Then I went through something that could be considered traumatic, that I don't think I will ever go into detail on here because even though it's been years since it happened, it still affects me, and the last thing I want is people with bad intentions to have that sort of information. By the end of it, because my mom lacked information on me as a young child, the place couldn't for sure give me a diagnosis. It was sometime after that my mom was on the phone, I think with her sister, talking about why I was lacking a diagnosis. I happened to come downstairs, I think, after looking through some old memory books of me in elementary school. Remember me attending 2 preschools? Well, I talked to my mom about it, but the thing is, at the time, we couldn't exactly remember why I went to 2 preschools. But this would set off my mom to then look up why I was sent to 2 preschools, and upon finding out it was because I was determined, quote-unquote, developmentally delayed, she would remember all those quote-unquote tantrums I threw when she brought me to church as a kid. She didn't talk to my counselor about it, and it turns out it's a small world after all, because my counselor was actually one of the women back then that took care of the kids in that classroom. You see, back then, she wasn't a counselor, but was in school for it. She still remembered all those quote-unquote tantrums after all those years and said she had reason to believe that they weren't quote-unquote tantrums at all, but instead meltdowns due to being overstimulated. With all this information, my mom brought this to the place that could diagnose me, and about a month after I turned 18, I got my autism diagnosis. It's funny in a way because back in kindergarten when I was around 5 or 6 years old, my teacher thought I might be autistic. Expressed these thoughts to my mom, but neither were ever really sure and didn't pursue a diagnosis back then. Sometimes I wish I could have gotten a diagnosis back then, because by the time I got my diagnosis at 18, there wasn't much that could be done in school, for example, because I was already so close to graduating. It hasn't exactly been easy since knowing for sure I am autistic. I don't think people around me really know how to treat autistic people. Some kind of look down on me, some think I'm using it as an excuse to get out of things, some doubt my diagnosis, and I don't exactly blame them since the condition has a history of being demonized. I'm not always optimistic about the public perception of autistic people like myself improving, but maybe in the future people's views will change for the better. Anyway, that's my story of how I got diagnosed. As for now, I will see you guys next time.